Hey everybody, welcome to CrossTalk with Kat Leigh. We're in association with Christian Media Spotlight, and we're here today with our guest George Tifft. Hey George,
Hey, Kat, how are you, sweetie?
I'm doing great. How you been?
I've been well, but you've been weller.
Weller or Orwellian? I'm not sure.
Yes, or not. We won't go there.
Okay.
No, I'm doing really, really well, Kat. I am.
Good. Good to hear it. Good to hear it. So, for those of you who don't know, which I'm assuming will be everyone, George and I have known each other since what, 2012?
Somewhere in there, sure. I was trying to
Somewhere in
think of
there.
that. I was trying to think of that the other night, and it was in the archives.
Way back. It's in the Wayback Machine.
Yes. But we
Um,
have we have we do have a really rich history together. That
yeah,
we do.
we do. For anytime I talk about this dude that I consider my mentor, it's this guy. There, I'll point to it there.
You need to raise your bar, Kat.
Sorry, you got in first. First come, first serve. Now I joined the Tifton Carver worship band right
Yeah.
around 2012, and it was led by this wonderful person, George Tifft, along with Joey Carver, um, and hence Tifton Carver. And yeah, we played together for about a year and a half, about a
Mhm.
year and a half, and we can tell some of those stories, but needless to say, George is the one who encouraged me to become a worship minister, an actual worship minister, and to
Mhm.
trust that God had this plan for my life. And so, yeah, blame him.
It's a burden. It's a burden to bear. I'll be called on the carpet for it someday, I'm sure.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. You will be held accountable.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned Joey. Joey, I came to Christ in '92 and just grew in Christ really, really fast. I accepted everything Jesus gave me and ran with it. And after I'd been in Christ only 2 years, I accepted a position as a director of evangelism and outreach at this inner city church in Connecticut. And I had never been on staff or done, I had no idea what I was doing. And the very first day that I was at that church, that evening, Joey and I just went over to the sanctuary just to puddle around and we started jamming together. And after about 20 minutes, we both just sat there and it was like that God quiet fell, where everything just like God's here. And we both just began to weep. And the way we describe it is, in Ephesians, it talks about accurate joinings. And with Joey and I, it was almost like an elbow to the arm. We knew we were accurately joined together. And when you joined Tifton Carver, we had had a couple iterations previously. And but when you came on, it was like God put whipped cream right on top of the whole thing and a cherry. It seemed no matter what we touched, it just worked. It just worked. It
It
was
did.
precious.
Yeah.
And I still today I hear from people about our harmonies. We did three part that was just yeah. Phillips, Craig, and Dean, you guys just need to sit down, you know.
And
You
he's
tell them I
so
said that too.
tall. But no, I mean it was crazy. I've never been in another situation or group like that where
Mhm.
we had that three part that just our voices just blended like
Yeah.
perfect. It was
It
like
was
the perfect
yeah.
cappuccino.
It was precious. It was precious. Cindy speaks about it all the time. And she doesn't have what I would call uh, a she has her relationship with Christ, but it's different than mine.
Mhm.
And but what she saw of us together was one of the greatest Christian witnesses that she experienced.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was. I mean, we did things that Christians weren't supposed to do.
Like laugh.
Um, yeah, like laugh or play in bars. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
That was special.
Yeah.
I remember the first time we were doing an open mic, and it was at a bar, and we did Amazing Grace, and the whole place just joined right in, and it was precious. It was precious. That's the witness I think we're supposed to put out there. You know,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
trying to beat somebody into the kingdom with the word doesn't make any sense to them.
No,
It doesn't make sense until you come into Christ.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then, just asking them to join, inviting them to join in with the music. That's such an easy sell.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Um, they just don't understand the words they're singing, but that's okay.
That's
You
okay.
know,
That's okay. So how I want these conversations to go is I'd really like to start with how did God, you mentioned you got saved and started almost immediately, but how did God get you? Like, give me the details of how God got you into worship ministry.
it was in '92 when I came to Christ, and I had just gone through a severe bankruptcy. I lost, when it says God brings you to your lowest low, He brought me there. One of my employees had committed suicide, and it triggered a whole bunch of things in my head. And when I came to Christ, it was at a tiny, tiny little Pentecostal church in southern Florida, and the pastor was from Defiance, Ohio.
Okay.
Okay, his name was Tandy Roach, and he was the pastor I needed at that time, without a doubt, because I had when I was a kid, I'd been sexually abused by a priest. And so my whole life growing up, God and I were on different teams. I did not want anything to do with God. And then in '92, through a series of events, I found myself sitting in my living room. I was going to take my life. And when God just opened a miraculous door through a Time magazine of all things. And it led me to this counselor, led me to this little church. And I had been in music prior to coming to Christ, but I think I had written maybe 5 songs my entire music history. And they all were terrible. All the songs were terrible. Then I came to Christ, and when God began speaking to me through the word, I just started putting the word to music. And I mean, in a matter of like 2.5 years, I wrote like 500 worship songs. They would every day I would sit down and they would just come. And because I can't read music, I remember I used to buy these little 15-minute cassette tapes, and I put one song on each side. When I'd have like 4 or 5 boxes of 100 tapes. And to this day, I still have those. I don't have a cassette recorder anymore, so I need to work on that. But I ended up in this little church, and the pastor was a guitar player, and he was a good guitar player. And I just one day, just fiddling around, I asked if I could, because I would sit in the front row in church because I didn't want to see who was behind me. Okay, I didn't want to be seen, at least not see them seeing.
Hmm.
And so what ended up happening was I have this propensity of singing quite loud in a worship environment, and the pastor could hear my voice. And the worship leader, Bobby was her name, she invited me to just sing with them, and it was just we had a keyboard player and a couple vocalists, and I said, well, I play guitar too, and so ended up just started playing, but I was terrified in worship. Okay, to lead, especially to lead. And I would turn around, and if I had to do a solo, I'd just get up there and close my eyes. And that became dangerous later on, especially when I started in singing in other churches, because a lot of times the pastor wants to stop things and go in a different direction or whatever. And I've got my eyes closed. I'm really not paying attention to you, because it says he's seeking those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. So if I take the pastor and all the other people out of it, I can move into worship, and hey, you're welcome to come with me. If not, well, that's between you and him. So, but it started out that way, and then I was there. Let's see, that was 92. In 94, I um, I was getting ready to go to Connecticut on a to a class reunion, and we were living in Florida. And at that time, I had never called myself a music minister or a worship leader or anything. I just sang in church. That was it, you know. And so I decided that I wanted to schedule a couple gigs just to go into a church and do like something. You know, I had no idea what I would do when I got there, but I knew that I could do something. And so I contacted a couple churches along the way and a couple in Connecticut. And I did one in South Carolina, and it just so happened to be in Cindy's mother's hometown. So
Okay.
Cindy happened to be visiting her mother and
So
came and saw
remind us
me
who
sing
Cindy
in
is because
church.
not everyone knows.
I'm sorry. Oh, Cindy
Remind
is
us
my
who.
wife.
There you
Cindy
go.
is my current wife. My previous wife, who supported me during this whole time, passed away. And I love you, Kat. But in fact, today is Sharon's birthday.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
isn't that special? Hey, baby. My
Yes.
wife passed away in 2013, and she she set me up for just a grand life. But with we get to Connecticut back in 2005. Five? No, we got to Connecticut, and I'm sorry. Don't get older, Cat. The We came to Connecticut in 1995, and I
Okay.
was with the, yeah, there we go. And but when we get to Connecticut, for going for that class reunion, um, the churches that I was scheduled to play at were closed. They literally closed down. They weren't there, and they never told me.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm at my mother-in-law's house, and I'm all broken. I'm just all crushed. You know, I'm in Meriden, and I'm like, oh God, what's going on? Right? And he
Yeah.
says, go to New Britain. And I literally said, New Britain, that's like Nineveh, you know? Because before I came to Christ, that's where the strip clubs were. And I used to go and, and I was like, New Britain, who would go to New Britain? And
You're from
so,
Connecticut, you get
yes,
it.
you will. You will. Hard hitting New Britain, baby. But turned around and I called this local pastor that was in the same denomination that I was in, and I said, "Yeah, no, hey, I'm in town, and um, I was scheduled to sing a couple places, and they shut down, and all this kind of hoo-ha." And he said, "Well, why don't you come up tonight and we'll talk?" It was a Wednesday, so I get up there that night, and it's right before service, and we're talking for just a couple minutes. He says, "Oh, do you have your guitar?" And I said, "Yeah, it's in the car." He says, "Why don't you open up with a short set, you know?" And so I got up, and going back to that whole thing about doing it with my eyes closed, right? So, and I would always do things in medleys because one of the things that disturbed me about worship was where they'd lift everybody up and they'd end the song and it would just drop like a rock to the ground. So everything I did in medleys. And of course, once I started, I just closed my eyes, you know? And so I'm going through this three-song medley, and this church had just gone through a split, a big split, ugly split. And so I turn around and I close my eyes and I'm going, and I finish the last song and I kind of cock one eye open, and God had mugged the house. Everybody was down. And the pastor's standing there like this and he goes, "Don't stop on account of me, you know." And when we were finished, I spoke to him. I said, "Hey, could we get together and go to lunch or something?" Because my mother-in-law was not a person of like precious faith, and it was a tough house to talk about Jesus in. And so he said, "Sure, we'll go to lunch." And while we were at lunch, he began to tell me about this split they had, and that they wanted to hire a director of evangelism and outreach, but they had no funds to do it. But they could offer the person a parsonage. And now my wife, my late wife, supported anything that God wanted to do with me, anything. She knew me before, and so coming into Christ, we can go with this, we can run with this.
Right.
And she said she would go anywhere that God sent me as long as we had a place to live.
Oh,
So when the pastor offered the parsonage, I was like, wow, this is like a God thing, And so we moved to Connecticut. The day after we get to Connecticut, our car dies. I mean, this thing dies like rolls over with four wheels up in the air. But it just so happened that the parsonage was right on the bus line. In fact, the bus stopped 25 feet out in front of our front door. In bad weather, people would stand on our porch waiting for the bus. So it
Okay.
was the perfect thing. And it was only like 5 minutes to where my wife worked. And so I went to work at the church and she, supported us. She became the breadwinner. And but so I'm working for the church and I have no idea what to do. Not one iota. I mean I'm green as could be.
Yeah.
And it turns around that I had to meet with the pastor's council because I wanted to know what I had for programs.
Hmm.
I didn't have one. I've never had a program. I just kind of do what God tells me to do.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening was I'm sitting before the council and they're asking me my programs and stuff. And I said, well, frankly, I wasn't prepared to answer that question. But if why don't we get back together next week and I'll put together a proposal and we'll go from there. And so they agreed. And so I scoured all the closets in the church. Kat, you know this as well as I do. If you go through any church, you will find closets full of things they have never implemented.
Yep.
So I went through all this stuff, and I put together a business plan and I submitted it to the council. And it had like a TV ministry in it. It had all kinds of stuff. And they they turned around and they shot everything down. And they looked at
Gosh.
me like I had a duck sticking out the side of my head. The funny thing happened though. The following week, the church voted in an entirely new council. Because
Okay.
where it left off with the last council, they said after they were done chopping up my plan, they said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, the word says none come lest the Father draw them. So why don't we take 6 months and do nothing? And that's when they looked at me with the duck. You mean you don't know what you're going to do? I don't know, but God knows.
Yeah.
And so they put a new council in place. And so I just went about doing nothing but just like trying to figure out how this whole place operated.
Yeah.
And one day I was walking through the sanctuary when the worship team was rehearsing, and they were okay. They were okay. I loved them all. They were great, great people. But the issue that they had run into was there wasn't anyone to lead them.
Mm.
They'd all get a chart and they'd just go
Hmm.
without really, and it was people were the keyboard player was playing drums when he should have been playing the keyboards.
Okay.
And so they asked me if I would just rehearse with them this one day. And I said, sure. And at the end of the rehearsal, they said, will you lead us? And I said, well, let me talk to the pastor. And he was agreeable with it. He was a musician also. So it just gelled really, really well. And what happened with that worship team, um, because I've always lived this, that none come lest the Father draw. In fact, when Kat and I, when we would play together, we'd always pray that God would change the ears of the hearers, okay? Because we didn't see ourselves being as good as we truly were, which was good because it kept us humble, you
Yeah.
know? And so started out with a five-piece worship team. And over the 4 years I was there, it grew out to about 12 pieces. We had a tiny horn section. We had choir, the whole bit. And when we would rock it, this place would just, you know, and but we had no outreach. We didn't do anything outside the church. They had part of my duties as the director of evangelism was I oversaw ministry at 5 nursing homes,
Hmm.
and I went to the first one the very first time I was supposed to be there, and um, I got kicked out. I guess it was just too much of a move of the spirit for them. And the big one was hospital for special care, which is, as you know, Kat, it's a hospital for quadriplegics, paraplegics, people that, and the guy who headed up the ministry there, the chaplain, he was missing an arm, because I'm trying to think, how am I going to relate to these people? I can't relate to them,
Yeah.
not like that. And And I figured, well, hey, this guy will be a great ally. He already knows kind of how these people feel, And the first thing he said to me was, now don't come in here and start giving these people hope. They got no hope. And I'm thinking, whoa, dude, what Jesus we talking about here?
Yeah.
And that lasted one day because when the lady went running down the hall praising Jesus, that was the end of my invitation to a hospital for
How's
special
that?
care. So it's like, don't ever ask me to pray for somebody in the hospital, Kat. They go home. Okay. Everybody wins. They go home. Yeah. So
Gosh.
that went on. I was there for 4 years, and the church, from the very first night that I was there, it went from about 20 on a Sunday night to 100 on Sunday night. Sunday mornings, we got up to 180, 190 people. And it caught a buzz, though, around the whole city. And my
Mhm.
pastor reached out and started an organization with these 10 other or 9 other pastors, all from the same town. And they started this pastoral fellowship. And every fifth Sunday, we would take and have a big gathering where all 10 churches would come together. And they put me in charge of the worship team. So now I could draw people from 10 churches. And,
Mhm.
we'd have 700 or 800 people pack a big church downtown. And we'd have a 18-piece worship team that could do anything, and dancing was allowed. So
Yeah.
we just tear it up, and it radically altered the footprint of the Christian church in New Britain at that time. And I started reaching out, working with other worship teams, because, churches, they not only struggle at times with their worship teams, putting one together, but they really don't know how to adjust sound,
Right.
so they put all the levers in a straight row and turn the volume up and off they go, and the mix is terrible. And so I taught them how to start using their equipment and how to upgrade their equipment.
Mhm.
And funny story about that. There was a church directly, almost, I think it was like 4 buildings down from our church, a little conservative church. And there was a kid, Fred was his name. He had just come to Christ. He was a guitar player, and he was a thrasher. And he had this old Telecaster. This boy could rip, but in his conservative church, him trying to do worship music on it, it was a stretch. And when I had gotten to Connecticut, I had a real nice electric guitar, and but it wasn't suitable for what I wanted to do with worship. So I traded it in, and I was able to get a nice Martin. And I had the Martin, and I had this old Takamine acoustic that I had written those 500 songs on. This thing was beat. This thing was so beat, right? And I was figured, hey, I'll give Fred the beat guitar. And I'm talking with God about it, and then God goes, if you were going to give it to me, which one would you give me?
Oh.
And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. So I gave Fred the Martin. Okay. And Fred just excelled. That church started to grow. It was really a beautiful thing. And then God moved for me. And I have never had a beat up guitar since. In fact, I've had some at times, I'm down to two now, one electric and one acoustic, but that you can't, that whole thing about you can't outgive God and just give your best. That was the core for worship for me. Um, and it translated to our time together. Our time together was superb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So through that time, you're honing your craft, you're learning what it is that God wants you to do. Um, where did like the traveling worship band come into play? How did that come happen?
Well, it first started. Um, there were 4 members of our worship team, our drummer, Tommy, and Joey, the bass player, and a girl named Donna. She played flute and oboe.
Mhm.
And we just started rehearsing together outside of church and started just throwing out feelers to other events. And the way it started, we saw an ad. It was for a worship thing we didn't even know what it was about. It was a competition though, and it took place at a real big church in Hartford. And we're standing there before we're due to go on, and we're listening to these other players, and we're like, my God, why are we here? You know, these people are really, really good. And we hadn't even figured out what we were going to play yet, you know, and we're on in like 10 minutes. And finally it came to me. I said, okay, we're going to do a short medley of these three particular songs here. And it was another scenario that once we started, I just closed my eyes and we just went, and it was raucous, right? This place exploded, and the same thing happened with at the church. All of a sudden, at the end of it, it's like God mugged the house, and we won that competition, not realizing that the prize was we played Taste of Hartford.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, for a Christian band to play Taste of Hartford, which was a big event, there's 50,000 people milling around this whole big area, and you're on the main stage. And we I think I started to get a little bit prideful because the very moment I hit that first note, now we're doing a medley, first note, I broke a string. And that guitar went so out of tune, baby. I'm telling you, it was like it was Deep Woods bad.
Ooh.
But out of and it sounded bad to us, but you know, God changed the ears of the hearers. What he was doing was he was correcting me, but
Right.
not damaging the witness or the ministry. And it was that was a big eye opener. But then it just started falling in place. Opportunities would pop up, you know, and if we did a gig at that time, if we did a gig every month, that was, oh, we got one coming, you know.
Yeah.
And but as it progressed on and the other iterations of the band took place, bigger opportunities, more opportunities. I think when right before we broke up because my wife had passed away and I could not stay in Connecticut anymore. And Kat and the other members of the band were the absolute, they loved my heart, man. They were there with me. And so we turn around, and I think that year before Sharon passed, we I think we had like we'd already done like 20 gigs that year, and then I think we had for a total, I think we were going to be like 34, 5 for the year, which for what we were doing, that was a lot. Other
We were
people were
averaging.
other people were not doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we were averaging, I think, three a month.
yeah. Which you know for a hometown Christian band. But then again, we were never hometown. We were the proverbial musician. We'd spend $5,000 on equipment, drive for 5 hours, play for two for nothing.
Yep. Now that's not true. We always had dinner money.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And but it was we went all through the New England region,
We even
and then
drove.
when my wife passed, now I had always been part um, of a band. And when my wife passed, it was just, I couldn't stay in Connecticut. The weight of it was just crushing. And a week, I want to back, before my wife passed, a year earlier, um, I had been approached to do uh, an album for a Christian label out of Nashville. And we flew down and met with them. You know, it was exciting. It was great. It was so cool. And we get back to Connecticut, and the next week, my wife gets diagnosed with this rare cancer. And so I call up the label and I tell them, I say, I can't do this. You know, and, I committed that whole season to just taking care of my wife, which that was the right thing to do. And she was the greatest supporter of my music ministry, absolutely hands down. And so, you know, and the anytime my wife needed to go to an appointment, you know, if the band had a show, I'd call the band and say, hey, I can't do this. And she'd get up in arms and say, no, you have to do this, you know. And where that played out the greatest, we had entered this competition. You remember this, Cat? And what it was is
From it came from that
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 bar.
link. Yep.
Yeah, that bar that we did Amazing Grace at, they had a thing going, and that was a pretty good sized venue for
Yeah.
Connecticut. And they had
The
a thing going that
Infinity, Norwalk, Norfolk, Norwalk.
Norfolk, yeah,
Norfolk.
Norfolk, yeah. And so we, by singing at this particular open mic, they put us in their finals for this special night where they were going to pick a band that would open for one of their national shows. And so it was a Wednesday, and we knew at that time that my wife's. We found out about 2 weeks earlier that my wife was dying, and from this concert. And we had turned around, and I wanted to cancel because I
Mhm.
knew she was close, and she insisted that I go to this. So her sister, who was a nurse, came up and spent the night with my wife, and we talked before we left, and I told her I'd call her when I was on my way home. And we went up and we did a song. We did a song. It was my wife's favorite song, and we came in second or third in the competition. But as we were driving away, I called, and my wife had slipped into a coma, and she passed the next morning. But she insisted that I go and play. And so after she passed, and I couldn't stay in Connecticut, I I moved to California. I figured that was far enough away.
No, no, no. You cannot gloss over this story. You cannot. We cannot jump to California. So the reason I'm doing this because George, throughout this whole time, George really, for me, taught me spontaneity. He's just like, no, let's do it. We'll figure it out as we go, right? And I was always very much of the control freak. Still have that tendency. And so working with George and having him just like, we're gonna do this. How are we gonna do that, George? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Doing that for a year and a half, seeing how God has blessed this ministry, seeing how God works through that spontaneity. I'm still not as good as George. I'm not at the George level of
uh,
spontaneity yet. But but anyway, so just to build upon Sharon passing, you know, throughout this whole time. I I think I maybe saw Sharon a handful of times.
mm,
She wasn't necessarily at every event, but she was pushing, she was supporting. And when when the time came that we knew her time was not long, um, I remember thinking, how on earth is this going to keep happening? And even after she passed, we had a couple
mm.
of venues, a couple of things booked.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
that one in the park. Oh,
Uh,
we had an event. There was an event in downtown Hartford
yeah,
at Bushmill Park, which is a big event. I can't remember what the event was, but it was
uh,
a big event. And
yeah,
we're playing on the band, on the bandstand, and it's a big deal to be there.
yeah.
And we it was by the grace of God that we got through that because you had literally had a panic attack on
Sure.
stage.
Yeah, that started just a couple days after my wife had passed.
Yeah.
And for me, music, worship has always been my safe place.
Yeah.
And she passed on a Thursday, and I did not know what to do. I was just like beside myself being at home. And we had already scheduled some time in the studio.
Hmm.
And I contacted the band and said, "Hey, I need to do something. So let's, go to the studio." And the Rich at the studio was just so gracious, and I can remember we were all setting up, and so on and so forth. And when I got into the vocal booth, the moment that door closed, it was like it just slammed in on me, and I had a panic attack. First one I'd ever had in my life. And if you knew how crazy I was when I was a kid and didn't have panic attacks, now this was a whole new thing for me. And so they, we left the studio and they kind of helped me out and we left. But we had that event at the Bushnell. And I remember, and this is, thank God we were a vocal band because absolutely, because right in the middle of one song, my body just shut down and I couldn't even finger a chord on the guitar. And I remember Joey just looking over at me, but we never missed a beat with the vocals. And so
No.
we were able to finish the song and we cut the set short, but you guys had helped me to the car. It was unbelievable how much that had affected me. And my wife was saved. Okay, my wife had so much grace in her passing, and I knew that she was okay. I knew that she won. She had run her race. She didn't die of cancer. She surrendered and went home. There's and it was just a crazy season. And then the next time I played with the band after that was at her memorial. But I had gone and met with a Christian therapist in Florida, and she helped me through it and broke that panic attack syndrome that I was in because we played at her memorial. And I remember one of the pastors came up to me and he was like, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "No, why?" He says, "You're the happiest guy here." And I said, "Hey, my wife went home. She ran a race and run." And that poor pastor, his wife was in cancer, had cancer right then. She no, she had passed. She had passed 9 years earlier, and he still wasn't over it
Yeah.
you know and for me, God gave me David when the baby died. It said before the baby died, David did everything he could, sackcloth, ashes, a whole bit, just for anything to help with the life of the child. But when the baby died, the next day he went out and he was wearing fresh robes and cologne and everything, and everybody was like, "Whoa, David must have flipped out." But what it is that God gave him the grace to see that you were at the limit to what you can do. And now it's time for you to, we are meant to move on.
Yeah.
Even in our own relationships, if your relationship doesn't progress, the longer you're together, then there's might be something that you need to work on there. But I learned more in that season than I think I've learned in any season.
Yeah.
Uh, Especially as far as worship is concerned, you know.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. It I think even even though I was very tangential in the whole thing, God used that season to really teach me that sometimes, I remember you saying this because I remember Joey and I and Ray, our drummer, praying for Sharon's healing. And you're like, yeah, that's all well and good, but it's got to be God's will.
yeah,
And you got to pray it in God's will. And you got to accept that that might not be his will, that she be
mhm,
healed.
yeah,
And that's what stuck with me, that sometimes it's not, the grand healing is not his will for that time.
mhm,
And like you said, he determined that she was going to go home by this.
yeah,
I heard there was I can't remember which Bible study it was. It was a I don't know. I did several in a short period of time, but it was a Beth Moore study, and she put it so beautifully. She said, trials, we're all going to have trials. You used to have that as a central theme for all of our shows. You think you're better than Jesus? Look at what God did to his son.
that's it. That's
You
it.
think you're not going to have troubles in your
Yeah.
and Beth Moore had this thing that there as a Christian, there are three outcomes when you come upon a trial. God will either deliver you from it, he will deliver you through it, or he will deliver you by it.
Mhm,
He will
yeah.
sometimes you'll see the trouble coming and God will say, "Yep, I'm going to take care of that. You don't have to go through it. He'll deliver you from it. Sometimes you'll see the trouble coming, and this is what happens most of the time, but you got to go through it. There's
Mhm.
something in there that you need to learn. You need to grasp. God's got something for you in that season of trouble, but he will get you to the other side. He'll deliver you through it.
Yeah.
There are times when he will use that trial to deliver you by it,
Oh,
and
sure.
you'll be delivered home by that
Yeah.
trial. And Sharon's cancer was that
Hmm.
that look at everything that she did for you. She was with you even before your salvation. I'm sure
Hmm.
she played a large role in your salvation.
She just thought it was another phase I was going through. It took a while, but once she realized it stuck, and she had been raised Catholic, so she, her version of the Bible had a plastic cover on it. It was open in case of emergency kind of thing. And but after I had been in Christ for about 4 or 5 months, and she realized that there was really something going on, she ended up coming to a true relationship in Christ. And she was one of the most grace-filled women people I've ever known.
Yeah,
She, just she exuded grace.
she did. That's a
Yeah,
perfect way to put it. She really
yeah,
did. She
yeah,
was just the kindest, most easy person to be around.
sure, yeah,
Yeah,
without
yeah.
a doubt. Uh, yeah, and then okay, we're past glossing it over now, Kat?
No, because this is the craziest story ever, and people need to hear this.
You talk about one of the crazy things. When Kat first joined the band, all of the equipment we had was hand-me-downs from one place or another, and everything was heavy. Everything was heavy. And so we had a band meeting, and we decided, okay, let's figure out exactly what we want, and we'll come up with a budget for it, and we'll figure out how to come up with the money. And at that time, I think the band had like $60 in the bank. Okay.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
remember I
we
was
never asked for a specific fee when we
right,
went to play.
right. Everything was a love offering.
Yeah.
And so, and some Christians really ain't got a lot of love in their offerings. Just saying. But
Mm,
any case, so what ended up happening was I told everybody, go home, scour your house, look for things that we can all get rid of. And I was down in my basement, and there was an older Swedish gentleman that had been a member of our church, and he moved back to Sweden. And when we were real, real good friends, and he was, I don't know, 20 years older than me, I guess. And but he was a big ham radio guy. And so when he moved back to Sweden, excuse me, he asked me to store this stuff for him until he was situated in Sweden and I could send it to him.
mhm.
And so I'm downstairs in my basement and I pull up back this tarp and here's this whole stack of ham radio stuff. So I sent him a note. I said, Pear, we got all this stuff here. What can I ship it to you? And he wrote me back and said he had moved into an assisted living center and they would not allow him to put up an antenna. So he
Oh,
told me to sell the equipment and use it for whatever I needed. And so at this meeting we'd come up with a list of all this modern equipment, just really cool top shelf stuff. And it came up to just under $8,000. And of course, we had $60 in the bank. Well, I had no idea what this ham radio stuff was worth. So I turned around and just started doing a little research, put it online, and we raised just about the entire $8,000 just off that ham radio equipment. So we were able to upgrade our entire um, PA mics, the whole thing. And what a change that made. That because everything was lighter. A lot of the shows we did were second floor. And I remember, and Joey, the bass player, he had a bad bag.
yeah.
And but his amp
Luggage
must have weighed
goes
200
there.
pounds, man. And then just all the equipment was so heavy
Yep.
and with the new stuff, his new amp was like 35 pounds. But it just opened up another avenue for us to really dial in our
Mhm.
sound.
Hmm.
And that it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Um, that was the first time we had a piece of equipment that would allow us to record a track live, and we could step into the house, remix it on an iPad. So when we started, that's the way it sounded. And that
Yeah.
was superb. We didn't need a sound man, which was always a big issue for us.
Yeah, it definitely made things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, and that was pre my Joe becoming a sound guy. So,
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
so he wasn't any help for us. Well, that and our kids were too young for him to come to most of our shows at
Hmm.
that point. But yeah, it was really interesting. Like you ask him now, and he will say that line, he's like, "Oh no, I can't stand that line." But that was good for you guys because our sound was it was such a unique blend that we really could almost set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Most bands aren't like that.
Yeah.
So
We
it,
and one of the big things that changed for me, and it really impacted the band too, was and I believe it was right when you first came on. It was had I done the thing with Jim Messina yet?
I think you had, yes. I do remember you talking about it quite a bit.
Yeah, I went to uh, a seminar. It started out as a seminar with Jim Messina out in
Mhm.
California. He was with Loggins and Messina back in the 70s. Just a prolific songwriter, one of the founding members of Buffalo Springfield, Poco, just that whole genre.
Mhm.
And so I go to this thing he's hosting, and it was a performance workshop. And, great. I'd been singing my whole life, but I never learned how to present myself in front of an audience. It's like even today, I can remember we'd go up to Vermont to these little fair type things, and we did one this one summer. And we always tried to record our gigs so we could play it back and look at it. And Joey and I were wearing shorts in the middle of this field. It was August, it was hot. And I looked at that video and I was like, my Lord, we will never, ever, ever do a show like that again. So we put down a thing. Okay, we got show clothes, folks. You got to dress because it's how you present yourself that is how they see you when you first start. And so if you go out there looking like you don't care, then it comes across kind of like you don't care. And but with the thing with Jim Messina was um, even though it wasn't a Christian event, I nobody has anything that didn't come from God. And so when I met with him, it was like I allowed God to transfer stuff from him to me. And where that played out again was not too much afterwards, I decided that I needed voice lessons. So I contacted this woman, local
Yep.
woman in Connecticut, but she is not a slouch. She's not like your music teacher,
No,
Christine Ullman. She's the
she
lead
is
singer on Saturday Night Live.
whoop.
And
Yeah,
boy,
if you know blues music in Connecticut, you know this woman.
yeah,
I think we can give a shout out to Christine's. Christine Olin,
absolutely.
amazing. Beehive
And
Queen. Woohoo.
yeah, she turned and she helped me in such a way that it immediately impacted the band. And then I suggested to you, Kat,
Yeah,
to go hook up with her, and you did, and it was such a game-changing
it
thing.
was.
That's one of the things that I would want worshipers to know. You can get upgrade to your skills, and they don't have to be people in the church. You
Right.
find people that are good at what they do because they got that good because God gave it to them. And if you go with the right attitude, you will receive it. And Kat, what it did to your voice was magnificent.
Oh,
It was
three
crazy.
sessions. 3 sessions. This woman, can I tell the story?
Please.
Okay, I don't want to make this about me, but this is a phenomenal thing that I to this day I will tell people about. Um, So I had taken about a year of voice lessons when I first started doing Christian ministry or worship ministry. And that got me that got me to control. I've always been a belter, always had the volume, but I never really had the control in my upper range that I wanted to have, nor did I have a good tone all the time. So that first initial year was learning how to breathe properly, how to support properly, how to get the voice up in the head voice. We're going a little technical, but that's about as far as I'll go.
Mhm.
And that took about a year. And then we moved out to Connecticut and I start with this group with George and singing backup for a lot of the songs. George, I'm a good singer, but George was the lead singer in this group. And I sang backups for most of the songs. And it I always thought to sing backups you had to lighten up, you had to pull back. And so I wasn't really, you give me a song to lead on, I'm going to belt it out, but when I sang for backup, I would lighten up. And George noticed this at one point. He goes, "Why don't you sing all the songs like you sing this song that you're leading?" And I'm like, "Well, because it doesn't work." Right? I'm singing higher. I can't, you don't want to belt it out. There was some truth to that, but mostly it was because I just when I was up in my higher range, I didn't have the power behind it.
Mhm.
And so George had taken lessons from Christine. He goes, "You know what? I want it. This is the cool thing that George did. He goes, "I want to pay for you to have lessons from Christine." And so I'm like, "Well, okay, how do I turn that down?" Um, I didn't really want to do it. But if he's paying for it and he's pushing me and he's kind of my boss anyway, I should probably do this. So I went over to Christine's and she had this cool little studio set up
Yeah,
and she is just the definition of cool.
yeah.
She's this they call her the beehive queen because she wears her hair in a beehive. She's got this platinum blonde beehive that is her signature, and
Mhm.
she has a personality to match it. You can draw your own conclusions on what that means, but she is just a cool person
Oh
to
yeah.
talk to. And we get in there, and she's got a karaoke system set up, and she goes, "Okay, um, take your pick. What song here do you want to sing?" And so I chose one that I'm like, "Oh yeah, I like this song." Okay. So I sing that song. I don't remember which song it was. But she goes, "Okay, cool. Um, all right, we're gonna step back from that." And she takes me through these exercises that I she gave me permission after we worked together. This was 3 sessions. She gave me permission after we worked together. She goes, "I don't know how this system works. The person who showed me didn't know how this system works. We don't know why this works, but it works.
Yeah.
So sing like an idiot, and then you'll be able to sing for realsies."
Yes. Absolutely true.
I have branded this is Muppet theory because because you basically sing like Elmo,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, boom, something subconsciously happens. I do know the mechanics of it now. I won't bore everyone in that. I charge people for lessons now and teach this too. So,
Good on you. Good on you.
but but there's a mechanic involved that kind of tricks your physiology into pushing that air up into your
Mhm.
head voice
Yeah.
and really giving you that power. So anyways, so yeah, 3 lessons in, that's all it took. She taught me this Muppet theory, and then she goes, "Okay, we sang the same song after this third lesson." We went back and sang that original song. I think it was an Adele song, and it was one that I could not. Um, I don't know if this is the one that I sang at the beginning, but at the end of it, I knew before the lessons I could not sing Someone Like You. I
Mhm.
couldn't get the high part in the chorus to sound right. And then after these lessons, all of a sudden, I could sing Adele.
Yeah.
And so I came back to George and the boys, and I'm like, "Okay, I got it." And all of a sudden, where our voices had blended so nicely before, now they really,
Yeah.
really blended beautifully.
Yeah.
And it's just a phenomenal thing. And I give all credit to Christine. I
Oh,
everyone
absolutely. Yeah,
knows that I got this from Christine Ullman.
sure.
But it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal thing to be able to it, there's a little bit of pride that goes along with being a musician. So you got to get
You
rid of
think?
God has some funny ways of showing us, but this one was one of the more easy ways that I had to humble myself and say, no, I could learn some more. I could learn some more. Yeah, 3 hours with Christine Ullman, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I can now sing Adele,
Yeah,
which
it was
later
a gift. It was a gift from God.
it
Absolutely.
really was. It really
Yeah,
was. And now, at that point, now the three of us, like I said, we're just singing even more strongly together
yeah,
because, iron sharpens iron. I put a
yeah.
little bit more power behind my voice, therefore, Joey put a little bit more power behind his voice. George was already singing full bore. You can't stop.
Lunatic. Yeah.
But now the three
It,
of us together are even more powerful and more dynamic and impactful. And it was
yeah.
just a really cool thing that she was able to do for us.
Absolutely. I remember when I was on tour, a solo tour, I was coming up to a series of Christmas shows, and I had Christmas songs that I had already written that I was going to do, and some covers and so on and so forth. And I wanted to cover "Mary Did You Know." Now,
Mm,
for a guy to sing "Mary Did You Know," there's that real high, high part. And I
yeah.
remember we were in North Carolina, and I'd be rehearsing in the rig, and uh, I could hear Cindy in the back when I'd go for that high part. She'd go, oh gosh, you know." And so I was like, okay, I got to get away from her. I can't do this here, right? So I just took my guitar and I walked out into the middle of this football field behind this church, way out. And I just got out there and I was out there for about an hour. And I just kept getting to that point and my voice would crack or something that would happen. And then I just remember some things that Christine said about opening the valve, just open the valve. And all of a sudden I started hitting it every time. And the first time I went to sing it at a performance was at Cindy's mother's church again, right? And it was a very staid uh, church, very,
Hmm.
yeah. I think I even wore a
Tie, young
tie.
man.
Okay.
Where's your tie, young man?
Yeah, that's it. And but it just there's Christian musicians, I think, need to realize that God can share the anointing from someone who's not in Christ to bring you to where he wants you to be,
Yes.
what you need to achieve. And it was um, between the thing with Jim Messina and Christine, it was it prepared me for what was coming. I didn't even know what was coming at that time. And and then when Sharon passed away and I didn't know what to do with myself, I reached out to the label and asked if the deal was still on the table, and sure, so go. And so I went down to Nashville, recorded the album, and set out on a solo tour. And because, as I said, I couldn't stay in Connecticut, and the band was just so gracious to understand that. I do remember there were times when some people got upset, but that's okay. You know, that was the moment because we had built something that was
Yeah.
so precious.
Yeah.
Um,
It was.
you know, if I've often dreamed about having you guys in the studio down in Nashville just to do something, you know.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So
That who knows? You never know what God's got in store. But
yeah.
yeah, that time was it was crazy because none of us were going to hold you back, and we knew that. And even if selfishly we wanted, I mean, especially, I'm going to say especially for me because, we were just finding a groove.
Yeah.
And personally, I had already had several times where, God, when he gives us a vision, when he lets us know what his purpose is, um, he doesn't usually give us a time frame.
No.
Nor does he give us all the details. You
No.
know, here I am with this idea that I'm going to become a musician and I'm going to sing for God. I don't have any details as to how that looks. I don't know what that looks like. When we moved to Connecticut, I was in my early 30s. What was I? 34, 35, somewhere in there.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, well, I was only 40, so
liar.
yeah, we graduated the same year, Kat.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. What about me tells you that I'm going to let you get away with a lie like that?
No.
No. Anyway, um, so I've got this humanistic view of, oh my gosh, I'm already in my 30s, and now we're moving to a whole different state. I don't know what this is going to look like. It took about a year for us to settle before I found Tifton Carver.
Hmm.
And now things are starting to roll. I mean, we had some big deals,
Yeah,
that the competition that we
sure.
did, the Bushnell, there were a couple other big ones there
Yeah,
in those final months that, for me to recognize, okay, this was just this season. This is not the start of something. This is not the vehicle that God's going to use to make me, a star.
hmm,
you know it was difficult for me to come to that, so I was going through my own personal things. The guys, I'm not going to speak for the guys, but they had their own issues and their
hmm,
own
hmm.
reasons for, wait a minute, we had this wonderful, wonderful thing and we need to stop, because there was no way this was going to go.
Yeah,
We talked about it. We thought we were going to be able to do it, but there was no way this was going to go on without you. You
yeah.
were you were the heartbeat of this group.
Hmm.
And it really, like I said, it was a painful lesson for God to teach to us that, no, you just got to trust.
Hmm.
I've got things. Even when you think things are falling apart, I've got
Oh
things.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And when we talked to you about it, as you were making this decision, I remember Joey really getting, he's your best
Oh,
friend.
absolutely.
You
Hands
guys have been
down.
doing this for now decades,
Hmm.
and he's like losing his left leg here.
Yeah.
And so that was really difficult. And I know he was trying to talk you out of it, something
Hmm.
fierce.
Yeah.
But God had other plans.
Yeah.
We got to go with his will, coming back to
Coming
his,
back to that.
always in his will. You could have stayed and forced it, but I don't think it would have been the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Retrospect is always easy to talk about, you know.
Right.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Now
No,
that we're,
at that
15 years
season,
out.
yeah, at that season in my life, especially with, I couldn't even, I couldn't even go to the grocery store
Yeah.
because of memories of the whole thing with Sharon being sick. And the band was my reprieve during that time, and it was in, when you're in that real heavy season and you still make time to make worship important because we took every gig. We used to have a saying: if there's five people, we'll play as if there's 500, and if
Yep.
there's 500, we're going to play as if there's five,
Yep.
and that carried us. But when, for me, being in that such emotional trial, worship was the one thing where I had solace. I didn't have to think about the doctor's appointment or all the bills coming in and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
it was in that, God moved so mightily. We all buckled down and kind of made it a focus. Um, and, yeah, we have no idea what God's plan is because, I came out of all that and now I'm a solo musician. I never really set about playing solo. I was terrified.
Yeah.
Holy cannoli. It was just a total mental mind game that I had to go through.
Yeah.
And I remember the first few shows, holy cow. Yeah, brutal, brutal. But once I just settled in and let God be God, no matter how it rolls. And I think the first year I was on tour, I did like 60 events that first year, did 150 the second year. And the third year, I was, I'd already done 80 when I decided to come off the road.
Hmm.
And but it all worked out to over the 3 years, 3.5 years, I did like 400 events, which that's a lot. And
Huge. Yeah.
you truly do not realize where you are or what day it is. I when I was in Alabama, I did 29 shows in 34 days. And Kat, they gave me barbecue at every single event. I couldn't get out of Alabama fast enough. I thought I was going to grow just to be this, I think I put on about 40 pounds. It was crazy. Whew, unbelievable. But hey, and when we were together as Tifft and Carver, we knew our music was special.
Hmm.
Joey and I knew that from day one, whenever we did something. Um, I remember the first time we went into the studio, this is the earliest iteration.
Hmm.
And we went into Trodnossel, which that's where Christine started, was at Trodnossel. Her
Okay.
boyfriend, I think it was her husband or boyfriend, was the owner. And our whole thing was at that time, we wanted to put together a worship album that was a worship album. The songs didn't break in the middle. We did a 30-minute thing, and it was a 15-minute cassette. So if you wanted the second half, you had to flip it. Okay. But it was the type of thing that we did a medley. And we made our own labels and colored them in ourselves, the whole and sell them, out and about. And I remember my sister Susan, she had just moved into an apartment in Vernon, and there was a girl moving in next door, or there was a girl living next door. And my sister went over and was talking with her, and her husband had committed suicide. And my sister, in speaking with her, said, "Well, how are you doing? How are you getting through it?" And she pulled out our worship tape, and she said, "I listen to this all the time. It's the worship that pulled me through." And when my sister told me that, I was like, because we don't see what God does with what we do. We see only in that moment, you know. And when we would go out and minister, like if we go up to what was the coffee house in Unionville?
Um, oh gosh, I can't
Jacob's Well. Drew, hey, I love you, brother.
remember.
Shout out to Drew. Drew,
Yes,
I understand they just shut down.
did. They
Yeah, wow. Hey, God bless him. He ran that
did
for
the
30
Unionville.
years.
Well, that's
I'm
Vernon.
sorry?
That's Vernon where they were. Unionville was something else.
Yeah,
But yeah, Jacob's Well. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
yeah,
Drew Crandall. Mwah,
yeah.
chef's kiss, Drew.
Big time, man. Good man of God.
Yes.
And but when I went out on tour by myself, I wanted to make it about the testimony. I'm not a great singer. I'm not a great worship leader. Um, but God doesn't need great to do great things. And so when I was out on tour, the first year that we were on tour, I tried to just make it about the music, And the second year, I opened up and started telling my testimony. And starting in that second year till the end of the tour, I saw probably 1,200 people come to Christ, which, it was nothing I did, you know. Your testimony is the thing that moves people. Worship like softens the heart, but it's the testimony that cracks through and lets the love of God shine in.
Yeah,
Makes them feel that they're not the only ones that are going through this junk.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's something that I absolutely learned from you. It's you tell your stories and that's what helps people connect.
Mhm.
Somebody's going to be able to pick something out of that and say, "Oh, yeah, I went through something
Yeah,
similar, and that's how you got through it. Oh, that's going to help me."
yeah,
And God says that, He allows
sure.
us to go through things so that we can help other people when we're through them,
Mhm.
to help other people going through them, because there were people through ours who helped us,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yes.
and to bring everything, all of that testimony back into worship. You mentioned taking your lead from King David, and that's something that
Mhm.
I always have as well. I think a lot of worshipers, for obvious reasons, take their lead from King David. But one of the things that I truly believe, God said, "This is a man after my own heart," and I truly believe the reason he said that is because no matter where David was, no matter what his circumstances, what he was going through, he always brought it back to, "But you are good, God, and you deserve worship."
Yeah, yeah,
You know, when he's stuck in the cave and, in fear for
sure.
his life and got 500 people that he doesn't even know how he's going to provide for, but they're looking to him. He's
Right.
like, "What the heck is going on? What are you thinking, God? But you're great. I love you."
That's it. That's it. If we die, we die. It's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Even if you don't deliver me,
Yeah.
still not going to bow. And, you know, God can use the guy standing up on the highway holding the 316 sign.
Mhm.
Um, but in the season we're in today, um, I, the way the Lord showed it to me, Kat, was we can um, we can share the word with anybody, but they can refute it.
Mhm.
Okay, because if they don't have a relationship with Christ, there's not that true guide inside,
Right.
and they can refute it. Hey, I don't just dispute it. It was written by men. They
Mhm.
were, as God moved upon them, they wrote. But they can always come back to, because there's so many statements that can be contradictory within Scripture. And
You want them
not
to.
to make this about a you know even Paul said at times, "This is me speaking, not God." You know, and we have no such custom as another thing that he said. But where it came real to me was I started thinking about the early church, and in the first 3 years after, or 80 years after Christ, no, first 3 years after Christ, they evangelized 80% of the known world at that time, right? And they didn't have one Bible amongst them. Okay. It hadn't been put to paper yet, hadn't
Yeah.
been mass produced, and it's not like they all walked around with these big scrolls on their shoulder. And but when when I share my testimony, you're either going to accept it or you're not. And if you're not, it wasn't given to you to believe anyway,
Right.
because it's the testimony that makes the human interaction in it. I can say, "For God so loved the world," as many times as I want, but if your heart has not been opened to receive it, then it's just words. It makes no sense. That's why Paul said that the natural man, it makes no sense.
Right.
You know, you need the
Right.
Spirit to interpret the Spirit.
Yeah.
And hey, quickest way to get God on the scene is worship, man.
Oh
Hands
my God.
down. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
he's more than
Because
faithful.
because the scripture says, when we pray, our prayers rise to heaven, but when we
Right.
worship, he
He
inhabits.
comes to us.
He comes
Yeah.
down to us. He's there. Yes.
Goosebump City, baby.
And if you've ever been part of that, oh my gosh, when the spirit is just heavy on the room,
Sure.
it's an
Yes.
amazing experience, and you can't replicate it. It's got
No.
to be by him. It's
Right.
got to be by him. You can do everything you can. As musicians, we know how to get a room going, we know how to bring it down and all of that.
Yeah.
Spirit's not there. We're just performing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you know it when
Yeah.
you're just performing.
Exactly.
Um, for me, if you see me break out in a sweat when I'm worshiping, I'm struggling.
Hmm.
But that was always the tell at the end of the night when I was on tour. If I went back to the rig and I'm soaked. I was like, oh boy, that was a struggle. I must have left the shoe off or something, you know?
Your fly was down through the whole
Yeah.
performance.
Oh, no, no, no. I think that's only happened one time. Yeah, never mind.
Gosh.
So I hear the Mets
Anyway.
are doing good.
But getting back to the testimony, I remember when I first was a Christian and started singing on the worship team and really paying attention at church. I was
Mhm,
in my 20s, mid to late 20s, and we were in a church in Ohio, and it's a great church, great church. And one of the things that they were really focused on was evangelism, apologetics, getting out there. One of the associate pastors would actually go on a college tour every year and stand on campuses and preach and
mhm,
welcome the jeers and the mobs coming at him. And he would stand there and just answer. I mean, this was before any of those guys were doing this online. This guy was doing it, right?
mhm,
And he was able, through the spirit and through his knowledge, just able to refute anything that they were giving him and just come back at him with God. And our church was very, very supportive of that. They grew from a campus church, so
mhm,
that this is their focus. And I remember thinking, I must not have been given that gift
mhm,
because one, I I'm not the apologetics master, right?
mhm,
I can have a discussion, but only up to so far because I don't have that quick wit. I've never had a quick wit.
mhm.
It takes me a little bit. I got to go back and muddle things, think things over before I really have a refute. And then like 3 days later, I'm like, oh, that's what I should
No,
have
I
said,
got it.
right? So I'm not that person, and I recognize that, and that is a gift that God gives to some people. He did not give that to me. And the other reason that I thought, oh, well, he just didn't give me the gift of evangelism was because my salvation story was not interesting. I have the
Mhm,
most boring milk toast salvation story there is. And it and then
mhm,
I meet people with these amazing testimonies. You literally with a gun
mhm.
in your
Yeah.
mouth see this ad and God pulls you back and uses you in a mighty way. I mean, that you
Mhm.
can't top that. You
Yeah.
can't top that. You can't write that. People wouldn't believe it. And so, I'm like, well, how is my testimony going to affect or impact anyone?
Mhm,
I'm 12 years old as at a Salvation Army camp. I
mhm.
mean, you don't get more basic than that. It was an
Right.
altar call. It wasn't even like this big thing that happened to me. So, but if you hear in how I presented that setup, that was where my confusion was. I
Okay.
was confusing salvation story with testimony.
Mhm,
And I thought they were one. And working with you really taught me that no, your testimony is how God is working in your life. It
Right.
may begin with your salvation story, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It's
Right.
what is God doing in your life? And it's those stories. It's being able to be vulnerable and show
Mhm.
people your brokenness, show people you're ugly,
Yeah.
that allows God's grace and God's love to shine through that story. And that's where the connection lies.
Mm.
You used to tell me the music is just the
Yeah.
vehicle.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. It's the grease.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
just
you talk about the testimony thing. Um, Someone we know, um, this person, a girl, she I knew her very, very well. Not in the biblical sense. No, she was just a real, real good friend. And but she had come to Christ early in her life, and she didn't get married till she was like 28.
mm,
And she listened to my testimony, and she said, I don't have a testimony. And she starts saying, I've always been a good girl. I always got good grades. I never fooled around. In fact, I remained a virgin till I got married at 28. And I was like, you don't think you have a testimony? To me, that is just a test, that I couldn't touch it, because we don't. Paul warned us, don't compare yourself to other people. And for a woman in that day and age to be a virgin at 28, I had never. To me, that was remarkable, and for her to not see it in that light. I remember I challenged her. I said, "No, that is the kind of testimony that a young girl needs to hear. That I
Yeah.
can go through all of this stuff, And her father was an alcoholic, so there's no telling how difficult her childhood was. But to go through all that and maintain control of your body and your mind till you were 28 years old. Sheesh, I didn't come to Christ till I was 35, and I was far from being a virgin, extremely far.
Mhm.
But the you talk about the salvation story, Kat. I don't know if I ever told you my actual salvation story. I told you about when I came to Christ in 92 when I wanted to take my life. But God reminded me of something. It says Proverbs 16:1, the preparation of the heart in man and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. So it just says God prepares the heart and he has words come out your mouth.
Mhm.
Well, when I was 14 years old, there was a girl, and I wanted to know this girl in a biblical sense. And so I asked her out on a date. She was a hottie, and she said, "Well, I'll go out with you, but you have to go to church with me first." Right? This was the evangelistic outreach here. So I
Uh-huh.
said, "Sure, let's roll." So I remember I went to this Assembly of God church.
So
This is
they
during Jesus music, the Jesus movement back in the 70s, 1972. And so I remember we go to this church. It was an Assembly of God, and I'm sitting in the back. She's sitting next to me, and I'm just thinking about what's coming. Hey, I'm at church. I'm doing the church thing. We're cool now. And so they had an altar call, and she gives me the elbow of faith. And so I can do this. I walk up front, and profess with your heart, believe in profess with your mouth, believe in your heart, Jesus Christ is Lord, you shall be saved. I believe, yeah, we're good, right? Turn around, walk back. I felt nothing, nothing. There was no change. In fact, looking back, that was the weakest confession of faith I have ever heard in my life. And so I go back, and of course, now the girl, we don't go out, nothing happens. I never got the girl. But that one confession of faith, I believe with every fiber of my being, kept me for the next 20 years. Because it
Mhm.
was 1992, it was exactly 20 years later that God brought me to that bottom place where I I acknowledged that he was there. And I mean, the things he delivered me from, Cat, I just craziness. By the time I turned 18, I had been in prison for 2.5 years, six mental institutions. I was in one mental institution for 6 weeks, and to this day, I still cannot remember being there. They did some electroshock treatment to get rid of memories. Got rid of a bunch of memories, just not the ones that needed to be gotten rid of. And but I honestly believe he honored that 14-year-old babble that came out of my mouth that I believe, and he held me with that. And that's the thing that disturbs me, Kat, when I see um, believers throw things at people like backsliding and so on and so forth. My core passage is Psalm 139, 15, 16. It says, all the days ordained for you were written in his book before one of them came to pass. So where you find yourself is where God has you. Now,
Yeah.
it might not agree with what other people think you ought to be or where you should be, but the ultimate truth is he is not done with any one of us yet. If we're still here, he's still working.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And he's not surprised.
not a bit. No, not a bit. I got to remind myself of that every single day. If you get caught up in the news cycle, you're going to start heading out in the la la land. I do it all the time. Then I got to check myself. What part of this caught God by surprise?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So
And it doesn't matter which news cycle you're looking at, there it doesn't
they're
it
all, yeah,
which side of the spectrum, and we're not going to get into political or anything,
not a
but
bit.
yeah,
No,
none of this. None of this. Biden, Trump, got on both.
yeah.
Blame both.
And he put both of them in power. It
Exactly.
clearly says God sets them up and God knocks them down.
Yeah.
And because we have our preconceived notions of what it's supposed to look like, and when God himself said, my ways are past finding out. So you might as well like change the channel, watch Friends or something, you know?
I started the
Barney
Big
Miller.
watched the pilot of the Big Bang Theory yesterday. I'm
There
like,
you go. Yes. Third Rock.
yes. Oh, what a great show. What a great show.
Uh,
That was based on Kent State University.
was it?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Go
Wow.
Eagles, Golden Eagles, I think is there. I don't know. I went there for 4 years. I don't know what their that is. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
big, loosely based on Kent State University. The writers went there. But anyways,
Amen.
totally off in a tangent.
Sorry about that.
No,
Bunny
no.
trail.
Okay, that's what's going to bring people to this podcast. They're going to think, okay, yeah, you got the surface thing, but where are they going to go off the rails?
Sure.
That's the entertaining part.
Yeah. 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 We never seem to have a problem with going off the rails, Cat.
Oh my gosh. No, no.
Yeah. Amen. But it's been a most amazing journey for me. I look back on it and just craziness. Um, and I injured my shoulders shortly after I came off the road. And thank God, Cindy, God bless her, we were on the road and we're living in this 39-foot motor home, and I could live in it forever.
Hmm.
And after the third lap, in the third year, she said, "Baby, I love you, but I need a full-size bathtub." And so she came back to Sacramento and set up an apartment. And I tried to continue on tour, and I went all the way up through Washington State, Oregon, down all the way through California, up through Nevada, Utah, gigging the whole time by myself, just loving it, just thoroughly loving it. And I remember I got to Granby, Colorado. I did this gig, and it's high up in the mountains. And as I was going to the rig that night after the show, I'm looking up at the stars, and they were big stars, And I got in bed, and I remember saying, Father, I don't know what to do because I'm heartsick. I love my wife. I love my wife. I miss my wife, but Lord, I love what I'm doing now. And I said, tell me what to do. And he said, I will honor whatever choice you make. And so I remember laying there, says,
You.
Father, I choose love.
Mm.
And next morning I got up, canceled 80 shows, and turned around and started driving back to Sacramento. And
Wow.
yeah. And and had that not happened that way, I would have been out on the road during COVID. And
Oh,
what does a touring musician do during COVID? You starve to death.
yeah,
You're
pretty much.
going to be being fed by ravens.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I never even put that together that you stopped right before COVID.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was, hey, in retrospect, great decision, God.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But you got to think, had you made that decision to stay out, that he would have provided.
Oh, absolutely.
He
I,
would have.
I, I don't doubt that at all. Um, but it was an important Christian witness for Cindy to see that she, you know, um, my worship ministry is not my walk with Christ. It's my worship ministry. My walk with Christ is my family. It's my wife, And and then afterwards, as I said, my shoulders got messed up. I had that shoulder surgeries, and it's made it difficult to hold a guitar for any length of time. I kind of diddle a little bit, 15 minutes here and there, but I have not done what I used to do. I'm going to get there though. I got an invite coming up that some people here in Sacramento are doing something and they want me to partake in it. So we shall see, said the blind guy.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah.
So you have successfully so far avoided the story of how you and Cindy got together.
Yes.
Were you doing that
It's
on purpose?
I I didn't know how long you wanted to go.
Oh gosh, we'll go as long as we have things to talk about. As long as it's interesting. And oh my gosh, is this story
Yeah.
interesting?
My late wife. Now my dad was 23 years older than my mother. My mother and father got married when my dad was 63. They had had an affair while they were both married to other people, and I was a product of that affair. And so when I was 10 years old, my mother married my real father.
Mhm.
And but him being 63, his wife had just passed away. She passed away in her sleep. And so he knew the immenseness of death. And
Mhm.
so we would talk about death freely in our house in a sense that he was like preparing us for when he was going to die. He thought he was, when they got married, their whole thing was if they had 5 good years together, they'd count themselves blessed. Well,
Mhm.
they had 30. He died at 94.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so with my wife Sharon, we had been married 8 years before I came to Christ. And when I came to Christ, I remember we were talking one day, and we were talking about death. And she told me that I could not die before her. She was 8 years older than I was, and she had been in love with a guy back in '68. He got drafted, went to Vietnam, died like 6 weeks later. And that was right after she found out she was pregnant. And so she, not only she lost her boyfriend, now she has a son. And she told me that I could not die before her because she couldn't handle going through that again.
Mhm.
So me being me, I looked at her and said, well, fine, if that's how it's going to be, I want a list. I want a list of women I'm pre-approved to see should you go home to be with Jesus. And for 22 years after that, it was our joke. We'd be at the mall and I'd see some cute little honey and I'd say, yo, babe, can you put one of those on the list? And she'd slap me. She'd slap me. She'd kill you. And so we found out, as I said, about 10 days before she died that she was dying. She'd been declared cancer free just 2 months earlier. And, they dropped the ball on that. But hey, all the days ordained for you. So I'm not going to beat them up. And so turn around and the day after my wife passed, I had my kids come in to help me clean up the house. And um, I figured since they were doing that, I would man up and clean out her purse. Now, I could dress a deer in the living room, okay? But a woman's purse is no man's land. I can honestly say in the 30 years we were married, I never once rifled her purse, okay? There's things in there just for men, they aren't. We got this thing, right? So the day after she passed, I figured I'd clean out her purse. And so I'm going through her purse and I'm literally tearing seams open to see if maybe there were a hidden compartment or whatever. And so I'm going through the pictures in her wallet of our grandchildren, and tucked in between two pictures was a note. And all it said was Cindy, California, and it had a phone number. I had known Cindy since I was 10 years old. I was best man at her wedding in 1976, and I knew she was marrying the wrong guy. Okay. Uh, so turn around, and a couple days after my wife had passed, I'm still running this phone number, because Sharon had only met Cindy on maybe 3 occasions at class reunions, and they got along famously. It was great, you
Yeah,
know.
you had a
It,
picture of you guys at a class reunion all together.
yeah. And so what ended up happening though was a couple weeks later, I was putting together a music video for my wife's memorial. And I pulled a box of, now, first off, I called Cindy just a couple days after my wife passed. And I asked her if there was any reason that she knew of why her name and number would be in my wife's purse. I mean, if you see somebody once every 5, 10 years, it's not a number you'd keep in your purse,
Right. Right.
And so I called Cindy up just a couple days after my wife passed. And I asked her, I said, is there any reason that you know of why your name and number would be in there? And she said she had no idea. And so me being in my brokenness, because when my wife got sick, there's a blessing in cancer, and it is that it takes away that thought that you're going to live forever. It makes time extremely valuable, you know? And we wouldn't talk around things anymore. If we needed to talk about something, we went straight at it. And my theory was it's easier to break all the china in the shop and just sweep it up than try to dance around it.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say the last year of her life was the best year in our relationship because we talked at depths that regular married couples don't broach the topics.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking with Cindy, the filters were still gone, because I was the way I would talk. I was talking with her the same way I would talk with my wife. No
Well, let's
filters,
be
just
real. You,
whatever.
you never had much of a filter to begin with.
Oh yeah, of course I did, Kat. Yeah, you can ask anybody who knows me. And
Does George have a filter? Nah.
and so when I asked her, and she said she had no idea, I told her the story about the list. Now, my wife, she died 3 days ago. And so it's not as if the candle fell out of the holder. It's like the whole menorah fell off the mantle. Okay. She thought I just did a deep six dive. And then when I started having the panic attacks, um, and I couldn't stay in Connecticut, um, I turned around and I went to Atlanta. My brother's wife was getting commissioned as the head of a nursing unit at an Air Force base, and my whole family was going to be there. So I figured, hey, I'll get out of Connecticut, I'll go to Atlanta, and just I don't have to be in Connecticut. And so I'm in Atlanta, and there's probably 300 people at this ceremony. And I'm sitting in the front row, and everything's well and good in the front row because I can't see anybody. But then when the ceremony's over, it turned into a big meet and greet, and everybody wanted to meet the family. So here I am, I'm having a panic attack now. Now, my brother's wife had been like 4 times in the green zone. She has seen the worst of the human condition, and she really knew what was happening with me. And so she helped me isolate and get my heads back on. Well, after that meeting, all my family was leaving Atlanta, so now I'm going to be alone in Atlanta, and I'm like, oh, this sucks, you know. And had turned around and I bought a first class ticket to Atlanta. And my brother, who's a pilot for United, he said, well, with that ticket, you can go anywhere you want to go, you know? And I said, well, I'm going to go see Cindy. Now, this is only 4 days after my wife has died. And we have this thing in our family. If you're going to come and visit, you don't tell them till you're on your way, because that way they can't back out. So instead of calling Cindy from Atlanta, I called her from Minneapolis and said, hey, I'm going to be landing in Sacramento later today. Can you pick me up at the airport and just drop me at the hotel? And she agreed. And when I got to Sacramento, I was coming down the escalator and I saw Cindy standing there. And it was the first moment of peace that I had felt since my wife had passed. And so I was in town for a week, and God moved just miraculously that whole week. And I flew back, and we started communicating back and forth. And I would travel. I couldn't stay in Connecticut, so great. I'll go out to California, just hang out. And it just it so I'm putting the memorial together for Sharon. Okay. And I pull a box of pictures out from under the bed. Sharon had been into scrapbooking. So these things were neurotically in order. You could tell I never touched this box. I didn't even know this box existed. But where I had said earlier how cancer gets you out of that mentality that you're going to live forever. When I pulled the box out, there were 3 envelopes standing up in the box. Obvious. The pictures were neurotically in order, but there were these 3 obvious envelopes. And one was addressed to my oldest son. It was his father that died in Vietnam. And in it was a picture of his father kissing Sharon the day he deployed for Vietnam. It was the last known picture of him.
Mm.
The second envelope she had addressed to her first husband, and it had some of his stuff in it. And but the third one had a greeting card in it. And in the greeting card was a picture taken at a class reunion in 1995. And you alluded to it. I'm sitting on a bench and I have my arm around my wife and I have my arm around Cindy. And it was then I remembered something that Sharon had said just 2 days before she passed. She wanted to present things to her grandchildren before she passed. So we had them come in and, God just moved mightily and a whole bunch of things there. And so she was able to present things to them. And after they were gone, we were there by ourselves. And I said, baby, what do you want me to do with your diamond? And she said, I want you to keep it. You're going to need it. Well, I was in panic mode. My wife was dying, so that just went right by. But 2 weeks later, when I found the picture, all of a sudden everything gelled together. And a year and 2 weeks after my wife passed, Cindy and I got married. She's wearing that ring. In fact, I'm wearing the same ring I wore for 30 years with Sharon, but Cindy had engraved on the inside of it, "We love you." And so it's you know it's it's the story. It's the story of the list. It was the greatest, other than Jesus dying for me. What Sharon did saved my life,
Yeah.
hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
I just
greater love.
I love that story. While you were living it, we all thought you were insane.
Oh yeah,
I can say that very, very honestly. We're like,
insane.
wow, he has
You're being
lost
generous.
he has lost his ever-loving mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, she knew. She knew. You
yeah,
could one, you couldn't be alone.
yeah,
Don't do alone well. And
no,
two, this woman, I mean, to think that she knew that Cindy would be the woman who could take this crazy
mm,
story and say, "Yeah, I can play a role in that."
yeah.
And then
It's yeah.
just
Go
do
ahead.
it so seamlessly. And I mean, she, like you said, she went out on the road with you.
Mhm.
She supported you. She uprooted her life.
Right.
And for,
She sold a home. She sold a home. Just she had a business. She walked away from everything.
yeah,
Um,
it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal woman and just the sweetest thing ever. I absolutely love
she'd probably say that I kidnapped her rather than she agreed to go. Okay.
What'd
That's a
you
little
what
kidnapping
were you
amongst
holding
husband
over?
and wife.
What'd you have on her?
Not a thing, sweetheart. No, what she had on me. But yeah, it's one of those strange but true. I write now. I do a lot of writing. I think last year I wrote 4 books. And I still try. I've been trying to write my story for 25 years, 30 years. And there's just so much in it that I kind of, once I start, I get lost.
Yeah.
It's like one bunny trail to the next bunny trail. But yeah, it's all God, every bit,
And
every
that's it.
bit.
That's it right there. You couldn't put that together without
Yeah,
God.
yeah. You can't make this up.
No. Hey Cindy, why is your name and number in my wife's purse?
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
unreal.
and but that same day, the first day she picked me up at the airport, Kat, we're leaving the airport, and I could sense she was concerned. It was like
Hmm.
concern for a friend kind of concern. And I, as I said, no filters. And as we're driving out the airport, she goes, George, what's going on? And without hesitation, I looked at her and said, I'm looking for the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, and I need to know if it's you. Yeah, I think that's when the mantle or the menorah slammed onto the tile floor.
Runs for
You
the
know,
hills
yeah,
screaming. Wow.
yeah. I don't
Wow.
think she could push me out at the hotel fast enough.
Less than a week after your wife of
Yep.
30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it gets even stranger. Did I tell you about the dating site?
No.
Oh, this is Sharon had been dead a day.
Hmm.
And, I just lost a woman that I had been with. I can remember somebody coming up to me right after she passed. And this person goes, I'm sorry for your loss. I know how you feel. And then he goes, my mom died just a few weeks ago. And because no filter, okay, George has no filter. And I
Hmm.
looked at him and says, well, I'm sorry for your loss, but can I ask a question? He says, sure. I says, did you sleep with your mother for 30 years? And he just got this shocked look on his face. And I said, um, because if you didn't, then you do not understand. So please don't say you do. And that was a big lesson for me to learn for with other people. We to be polite, we say things like that when the reality is if you don't know, just offer your condolences. Don't embellish it. I
Right.
know how you feel. Uh, Unless you're from some weird county in some state that I would never want to live in, you didn't sleep with your mom for 30 years. Just it was just but it was a big thing for me to 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 release that because yeah, when we share our testimony, it can trigger other people with memories they have. But you need to don't ever undervalue your grief. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
It does.
you know and I had lost both my parents at that point, so I understood how he felt, but I never lost a wife before. That would be like going up to somebody who lost a child and saying,
Hmm.
how they feel. If you never lost a child, that's for a parent is the most terrifying one there is you
Hmm.
know um but hey, sorry it got so dark on you.
No, no,
uh,
don't apologize.
you know
You were
but
talking about the dating site, though.
oh yeah, I was hoping I could get by that one, but
You brought it up.
I know. So it's the day after my wife had died, and I'm just beside myself in grief. And I was terrified at the grief because I'm a born again believer. I know where my wife is, and I know she is well. She's happier now than she was the day before, and all that good stuff. And but I'd never felt so alone. And so I got on a dating site and I signed in. And they wanted recent pictures. So I went through all the pictures that I had of Sharon and I, all the things that we had done, baseball games, football games, concerts, concerts in the park, picnics, hugging, kissing, all this good stuff. I put probably 25 pictures up there. And then they said they wanted you to be honest. So I
Hmm.
wrote out this letter and it went something like, I had been married to a woman for 30 years, and she was going to leave me a list, right? And I go through the whole list story in this writing,
Yeah.
and so and then at the end I said, "Well, if you can look at these pictures and look in my eyes the way that you see her looking at me, and if you can see me looking in your eyes the way I do her, then send me a note." I got up the next morning, I had 900
Are you?
replies, right? I was, talk about the panic attack,
Oh my
right? I
gosh.
went on the site, I deleted everything, I shut it down the whole bit. I was terrified. I thought I was being stalked, right? It was
Wow. Like
craziness,
Sleepless in
crazy.
Seattle here. Oh my
Huh?
gosh.
Yeah, it was like, no, 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 and it was, yeah, just, yeah.
I
So
didn't
my
know what I was
advice is
asking for.
don't
I'm
do
sorry.
that. Don't
Wow.
do that. Um,
Lessons in what not to do.
That's it. Yeah. There's my
There's your
next book.
next
What's
book.
not to do when your wife dies?
There's your next book, George.
There's
the one you need to write.
Stupid is as stupid does. So yeah. But hey,
So,
we've had a good run, Kat, for sure.
oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah.
But you and the band, you guys were so supportive. I could not have done what I did without you guys behind me. And
Sweet.
I miss that.
Yeah. It was a very sweet season.
Yes, it was.
I think back on those days. I mean, like I say, I consider you my mentor. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it hadn't been for your influence. In fact,
Yeah.
I remember a conversation that we had, and after you moved out to California, we talked maybe once or twice a year, and that's about it. You give me a call, hey, Catherine,
Hmm.
how you
Yeah.
doing? What you doing, girly?
Yeah.
And I'd always be like, nothing. I don't know what. I don't know what God's doing in my life. I mean, I was in a depression.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me, just get out on the road. I'm like, I don't have a band. So get some backing tracks. You're fine. I'm like, that's just glorified karaoke. And you would say these little things and I would literally in one ear out the other, I would blow you off. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not doing that. That sounds dumb.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it finally it finally started clicking and I don't know I think I just had to get into a place where I could hear it, but you never gave up. You were always saying, Catherine, you need to get out there. Kat, you need to get out there. You need to do this. God's given you something. And I remember the last conversation we had before I decided to do it. Um, I was like, I wouldn't even know, you have this amazing testimony. And I wouldn't even know what to say. And as I'm saying that, I hear God say, yeah, you do. And then you echoed, yeah, you do. You know
Uh-huh.
what to say.
Yeah.
Okay, God. And I
Yeah.
did. I knew what story he wanted me to go out there with, what testimony. And so I remember getting off the phone with you and just thinking, huh, maybe I can.
Hmm.
And Joe got home from work and I'm still in this kind of weird headspace. And I'm like, hey, I talked to George a little bit ago. And he's like, oh, no, what's up now? And I laid out, I said, and I've been saying, no, I can't, but maybe I can.
Right.
And Joe's like, I think this was on a Thursday. He
Hmm.
said, give me the weekend. I'm going to do some research. I'll get your equipment for you and learn how to run it, and we'll start booking next week. And
Right.
I'm like, wait a minute. No, you were supposed to tell me why we couldn't.
Yeah, you got your own Sharon right there.
I do. I
Yeah,
do. He literally that weekend by Sunday we had our equipment. He had
I remember.
researched the soundboard, he researched the speakers. I think he found the microphone for me.
Hmm.
Everything that I needed, he researched and just said, "Nope, we're going to Guitar Center. We're going to go pick
Uh,
everything up." I'm like, "How
yeah,
are we going to be able to do that? We are not
yeah,
rich people. We don't have this money." He's like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll put it on a credit card. It'll be fine. God will provide."
yeah,
Like, oh my gosh.
yeah,
And lo and behold, he absolutely does.
sure.
So none of that, it certainly wouldn't have happened as soon as it did without you. So just that time that we had together, learning from you, learning how to get in front of people and not let my inhibitions, not let my fear get in the way of just
Hmm.
being real with people. All of that I learned when I was with you. And just being able to get my own ministry out there and
Hmm.
and meet the people that I've met and do the things that I've done since then. You said we don't always get to see how God works, but
Right,
you do with this one. You
sure.
do.
Good on you.
And I've done some really cool things, and it started with George Tifft and Tifft and
Yeah,
Carver.
yeah. Well,
So
amen.
thank you.
No,
Thank you.
thank God. Thank God. Absolutely. It's
Oh,
Yeah. God is still good, isn't
Yes, he is. Yes, and he is still good because he's not done with us yet because we are still drawing breath and we still have a
he? Right.
purpose.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that I learned that our purpose can change. You
Sure.
know, there are to everything, there is a season. And for the
Yeah.
Carver season, that was our season for that.
Hmm.
But, then we had George going off and doing your solo thing, traveling the country for 3.5 years in an RV, literally just going town to town and sleeping in the church parking lots
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But with this amazing ministry, I mean, the amount of people that you said you saw come to Christ through
It
that,
was craziness. Yeah.
praise God.
Yeah. Oh,
Praise.
absolutely. Yeah.
But that couldn't
Um,
have happened if we'd have held on to Tifton Carver,
right.
right? So
Hmm.
to have that and then to recognize that that season was done, to move to Sacramento, tell me what you're doing now because this is cool.
It's an interesting season. My dad, um, he always adopted technology. I remember when in the mid 60s, he got the first digital calculator that came out. It was made
Wow.
by Radio Shack or Tandy. And
Uh-huh.
all he did was add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It
That was a
ran
big
off eight AA batteries for a calculator, right? And it was just a little tiny thing. And it came in a
really good.
presentation box and everything, right? And it was like $800 at that time. This calculator, the free watch they'll give you, in a box of cereal has more technology in it than what they had then. And but what that did for me was it always made me an adopter of technology when it first evolves. Get in at the beginning and just kind of keep building and until you figure out where you're going with it.
Mhm.
And as I said, I struggle with playing guitar, but I still love the creative side of music.
Yeah.
And so when ChatGPT first came out, I was using it for all kinds of things, just research. And I talk to it like it's a human being. I'm a weird like that. And so one day, out of the blue, I asked it to write me lyrics to something, right? And in a split second, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then I turned around, I said, okay, let me challenge this thing. And I made up a story. Okay. A bus driver in New York, he's retiring, and the only day he missed a day of work was there was a blind or a deaf girl on his route. And the day she graduated from high school, he took that day off and right. And so I punched just that little short snippet and said, write me lyrics to a song for that. And
Mhm.
boom, it pops out. And I'm not playing it or anything, but I'm reading the lyric and I'm like, man, that's amazing. And like I said earlier, who has anything that didn't come from God? And, so many believers are afraid of artificial intelligence when the reality is God gave it to the church. And if the church can wrap their head around it without getting into the funky, hokey wolf stuff, it's a great tool.
Uh-huh.
Well, I had a friend of mine who had just passed away. And so I turned around and I pulled her obituary right out of the paper and I put it in Chat GPT and said, write me lyrics to a song that fit this. And I gave it a time parameter. I said, keep it under 3 minutes, 15 seconds, and make sure you put the timestamps of the verses and everything on it.
Mhm.
And I had found this other program that I could just take that, flip it over, and stick it right into that program and say, um, write music to this song here that has make it a ballad, have it be with a light country feel with a soulful male voice. And I hit the button, and 30 seconds later, it spits out this song. And when I hit play, I was stunned. I was stunned how good it was. It was phenomenal. It was like and the progress that has been made in AI with um, music programs to that you can manipulate it. You can, do anything with it that you would do with a band. You could, regenerate it and change the bass line or whatever. And so I turned around and I started doing those just for, people that I knew. And so I've just started a website, a YouTube channel a couple weeks back, a month back. It's called Lyrics of Life. And what it's about is every life deserves a song, every life. And
And
so it's just become a new avenue for me to reach out, you know, to, to be a blessing to people. And as you are witness of the the technology and the power of that combination of programs is amazing. I have yet to do one for someone. And my hope is that people will use them like at memorial services or, just to help them get through the day.
yeah.
And it's phenomenal how I love it. It's all joy.
So
Yeah.
you were telling me about this as we talked to prepare for this. And so my thought immediately went to my stepdad.
Hmm.
My stepdad passed away oh gosh, 6 years ago.
Hmm.
And it took my mom three tries, but she finally got it right. He was the love of her life, and
Yeah.
he was a great guy. He was um, everything, everything a dad should be to me and my brother, everything you would want for a grandfather for your kids. Um, for those of you who don't know, I don't have a good relationship with my dad. So to have Jerry step in and show me that, hey, dads can be amazing people, right?
Hmm.
Not that, it's different. Joe is is an amazing father to our kids,
Hmm.
but to have that experience for myself, I didn't think that it was going to happen.
Hmm.
So like I said, he passed away about 6 years ago. He had Alzheimer's, and to watch that wonderful man deteriorate,
Yeah. Yeah.
disappear like that. They call Alzheimer's the long goodbye, and
Yeah.
until you live it, you can imagine, but you can't really
No,
understand.
you can't. Yeah.
And I watched it from afar. My mom obviously has much deeper experiences with that long goodbye, and it broke her heart.
Hmm.
I remember they had been together for about 12 maybe 13 years,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he had kind of recently gone over another cliff. That's the way Alzheimer's works. You hit this plateau and you're there for a while, and you don't know if you're going to be there for a day or a year.
Right. Right.
But when you go off that cliff, you're never coming back. Now you're on a new
Yeah.
place. And he had recently gone over a cliff, and he didn't fully remember her anymore.
Hmm.
And she I remember her standing and just with tears in her eyes saying, "We had 10 good years,"
Hmm. Yeah.
and being grateful for that time that they did have, but just that recognition of this is not good, right? So anyway, I sent you his obituary.
Hmm.
I'm going to read it, um, and then we're going to play the song that
Okay.
you created for Jerry. Jerry Antrim, age 75, passed away on November 22nd, 2018, at his home, surrounded by his loved ones. He was born June 24th, 1943, in Alliance, Ohio, to the late Harold and Mabel Antrim. He was an all-around good guy that loved spending time with friends and family. He loved his work, snowmobiles, animals, camping, working with his hands, square dancing, that's where he met my mom, and being a math wizard. He was a meat cutter for Giant Eagle for many years. He was a graduate of Alliance High School. He was a member of Damascus Friends Church. He met the love of his life, Nina, while square dancing and was married April 29th, 2005. He is survived by his wife and three lovely daughters. Um, I'm not going to name their names, and stepchildren, me and my brother. Um, Grandkids, had quite a few, and a great grandchild. Besides his parents, he was preceded in death by his brother. A funeral service will be held, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So you get the picture. Now, our producer Elizabeth, we arranged ahead of time for her to have, we couldn't do the video
Yeah.
because YouTube,
Guilty.
YouTube. It's Alliance, Ohio. Come on. We do
I
not
know.
copyright video stock footage of Alliance, Ohio. Nobody even knows where Alliance, Ohio is. Anyway, you got pulled down off of YouTube because they were being persnickety about
Whatever.
video footage. But
I
we did,
violated the rules, Catherine. Okay.
I know. Well, this is what bureaucracy gets you. You get, rules that don't make sense and have to be applied. Anyway. Wow. Very diplomatic.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's my turn to not be. Okay. Anyway, so we have the audio of the song that was created through Chat GPT and this, what's the other program?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. It's proprietary. It's George's secret blend. Elizabeth,
Yeah, yeah.
do you have
Mixed
the
nuts.
So this is from that, just that obituary. This is the song for Jerry Antrim.
It's called A Good Man's Hands.
Good man's hands, yes. Go ahead, Elizabeth. We love technology.
When I was a child, I was much smaller.
That's kind of the go-to when you don't know what to say. Talk to us, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
What's
Well, let me just unscreen share this real quick and let me see if I can't get it back for you guys so we can play this.
okay?
Uh,
I will say, um, when I heard it, I teared up, and then I showed it to my mom.
Yeah.
all right, I think we got it again. Just yeah, learn to play the thing first, then go full screen.
Okay.
Okay. Come on, now it doesn't. Okay, fine. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. This is
No, you're fine. You're fine.
oh,
Technology's great when it works.
I am the play button.
Perhaps,
The play button
perhaps in
goes
the
back
edit,
up for me
you
to
could
play it when
take
I.
and come back to it.
Oh no, I'll get it. Don't worry, I will get it.
That's what my mom said when she left me at the mall, Elizabeth. 8 years I waited.
Even if I have to share it differently with just computer audio, that's what I'm gonna do. Because that seems to be the one option that might work this time around, and then I will figure out how to.
The moral imperative.
I'm not. I don't know. Actually, I'll try one more time on screen.
One more time. Okay.
And if I can't get it, I will do computer audio.
Okay.
I don't know why the play button disappears every time I share the screen. Okay, good. There it is. So, oh, come on. It stays hidden every time.
That's really weird because I can see the play button.
Yeah, and I can't.
I can't.
It doesn't like me right now.
A little to the right.
Yeah, that's the
Hey,
end. Yeah, of course it's hidden there. I see it too every time my mouse goes across it. Oh, come on. There, there
Perhaps if you
we go.
minimize the screen.
here we
Born in a nights, 'neath an Ohio sky, worked with his hands, let the years roll by. Snowy trails, a fire so bright, a math wizard's mind, and a heart full of light. Oh, we danced through life with a smile so wide, cutting through the years with love as his guide. Square dance steps where the good times belong. A good man's hands kept the world strong. Met his love on the dance floor's grace, spun her around, found his place. Through the seasons, through the years, hand in hand, through love and tears. Oh, he danced through life with a smile so wide, cutting through the years with love as his guide. Snowy trails where the good times belong. A good man's hands kept the world strong. With numbers and wisdom, he'd make the world turn. A meat cutter's craft, a fire that burned. Family first, through thick and thin. Now he rests where love begins. His daughter's grandkids carry his light. A great-grandchild smiles in the soft morning light. The lessons he gave, the love he spread, live on in the words he once said. Oh, he danced through life with a smile so wide, cutting through the years with love as his guide. Square dance steps where the good times belong. A good man's hands, a good man's hands kept the world strong.
Amen. Amen. You know, it's the technology is crazy. And hey, granted um the depth of the music isn't what you would have if you went into a studio and built it out. But for something that we going back to that first cassette tape that I had that the girl's husband had killed himself, did not realize the impact that song those songs had on her. And
Yeah.
knowing and experience, all of us experience grief and loss, and but music is the thing that can help ease the pain. That's why, when you worship, when you're in a state of brokenness, it will carry you through it, but so that's what I'm doing now as far as the music goes, is I generate those things and I send them out to people, and try not to get violated on YouTube. Who'd have thunk it, right?
Well, apparently you just need to go out with a drone and get your own footage.
But in Sacramento, trying to get footage of Alliance, Ohio.
I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're one of the three people from Alliance, Ohio, who's gonna know?
Hey, I don't fault the girl. For her, it's a business. Okay. She monetizes her videos. All well and good.
Sure, sure.
Um,
But yeah, I mean, just to come up with some of that phrasing, I mean, some of it you could tell they forced it in,
sure.
but the essence of, he danced and smiled through life. He
Right.
did.
Yeah.
If you didn't know Jerry Antrim, you wouldn't have necessarily gotten that from the obituary, but
Hmm.
the song, somehow that made it into. And
Sure.
he always had the biggest smile and the biggest heart for people. And my kids called him Grandpa and
Yeah.
loved him so
Sure.
much. He took them camping, and they looked forward to that every year,
Right.
to camping with Grandma and Grandpa. And it to have even a bit of that
Hmm.
in this song that a computer generated.
Right.
Nobody sat down that knew Jerry Antrim. Nobody sat down and wrote
Right.
these words out, you know, but it was able to encapsulate, and that's amazing to
Yeah,
me.
it is. It can be such a gift for people that are there's a girl that I'm friends with on Facebook. I met her at a concert in Delaware, I think it was, Maryland, maybe. And, I don't remember meeting her, so to speak, but she had lost her husband. They'd only been married a year.
Hmm.
And I did that to his obituary. And you could just tell that it hit it was the arrow that hit the mark. It was something that she needed to help move her from where she was.
Yeah.
Um, but and it's something that she'll have forever. I have one that I did for Sharon years back. That every now and again, I watch it, but you know got to keep certain memories in certain pockets, otherwise you could find what's it say in Hebrews? If they kept looking back, the opportunity would have opened up for them to go back.
Yeah.
And you can't go backwards.
Yeah.
Sheep are forward moving quadrupeds. You don't move forward, you die. So
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
yeah.
That's funny.
But,
But
so
yeah, how can tell everyone how they can get in touch with you? Because I have a feeling once people hear this, they're gonna want to know, hey, I want this for my family.
if they go to Lyrics of Life on YouTube and just post a comment that you'd be interested in, then we can sit up and we could DM each other. I'm in the process of putting together an individual website for it, but I'm not there yet. And, that's more work than I want to do right now. I'd much rather just make songs and send them to people and not get kicked off YouTube.
And not get
So
kicked off YouTube. So along with the obituary, maybe send 20 or 30 pictures,
well, actually just connect first and let's figure out what you want to do. And
Yeah.
as I said, it's I don't charge for this. If you want to give me a donation, great. There's always a donation link, but it's God's my provider, and if I'd much rather just be the blessing than be the product.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, brother, this has been so wonderful. Just getting a chance. Some of these stories I haven't heard the full extent of, so it's very entertaining for me. But just getting the chance to touch base with you again and spend this time with you, I know it was a blessing for me.
Oh,
So,
Kat, uh, and thank you for rearranging your schedule. We had ran up to Lake Tahoe for the weekend and we're hiding out, and I realized that, oh, I'm not going to be home. So, for helping me with the reschedule. But I thought about it all weekend. I really did, and I was looking forward to it. I miss your face.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and but it's been an absolute honor and a joy, and best to you with this. May God just pour grace all over it, and may we change lives, or at least open doors so He can.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
And
this.
hey, give Joe a big wet kiss on the neck and tell him it's
Oh,
for me. I remember that used to terrify him when I said I was going to do that. So
he would have it no other way.
I love you, kiddo. Be well, honey.
Love you too. You as well.
Hey, thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth, our producer.